Welcome to this first TJHD talk of the season. We are delighted that you've chosen to join us, and we are indebted to our esteemed scholars and our partners for this program, the POLIN Museum of the History of Polish Jews, the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute, and the American Friends of POLIN Museum. We are honored to host our speakers, Dr. Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett, Dr. Natalia Romik, Dr. Justyna Koszarska-Szulc, and our moderator, Stuart Schear. As is our custom, and for those of you who are new, we invite you to share a chat or pose a question in the chat section, as we will have a Q&A session after this conversation. So without further ado, Stuart, I turn the mic over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise, and thank you to everyone from around the world who's joining us today for this discussion. We're so delighted to be here with all of you. On behalf of all of the speakers and on behalf of myself, of course, we want to thank the Taube Center, POLIN Museum, the Association of the Jewish Historical Society in Warsaw, and of course, the American Friends of POLIN Museum, all for coming together to sponsor this conversation. And our focus today is the new temporary exhibition at POLIN Museum, Post-Jewish Shtetl Opatow, Through the Eyes of Mayer Kirshenblatt. That is the focus of our discussion. We are fortunate to have the two curators of the show with us, and also Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett, the daughter of the artist, who's long been engaged with him in a partnership that resulted in this amazing exhibition, which I was fortunate enough to see 2 times on 2 different visits this year. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to now turn to, let's start, I think, logically with Barbara. Barbara, as you know, the focus of the panel is the post-Jewish exhibition. And I was hoping that you could kick off today's conversation by telling us about this, telling us about the exhibition.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Stuart. And thank you also, Elise and Kuba and all of our sponsors. Let me make sure I can, whoops. I have to make sure that I can share my screen. Just a second. Okay. Kuba, I'm having difficulty sharing. Oh, I see. The screen is already shared. Sorry. This platform is new to me. So I'm assuming that most everyone understands where this exhibition is taking place. It's organized and taking place at POLIN Museum of the History of Polish Jews, which, as you can see, stands facing the Monument to the Ghetto Heroes in Warsaw. And it's a very special exhibition. And it's, as Stuart and also, I believe Elise has also already mentioned, it deals with the idea of post-Jewish. We're going to talk more about that concept during our conversation, but that concept is very, very central to the very central to the whole idea of this exhibition. Now, the starting point, in a way, the inspiration, begins in 1967 when I began interviewing my father, Mayer Kirshenblatt. He was born in Opatów in 1916, and he left in 1934 when he was 17 years old, and he settled in Toronto. And in 1967, I began interviewing him about everything he could remember about his childhood in Poland. And he had really an exceptional memory. He finished primary school, so he had no formal education, but he was what I like to think of as an ordinary person. And when he was 73, he began to paint what he could remember, and he painted for the last 20 years of his life. And he left us an extraordinary visual record to go with this 40 years of recorded interviews. And that visual record, those paintings, became the starting point for this exhibition. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the whole concept of the exhibition evolved. So I wanted just to give you a sense of what the exhibition itself looks like, because this is what we're going to be talking about, and we're not going to be showing any images while we have our conversation. And when Justyna has a moment, she will talk with us about the decision to present the paintings in this way. And of course, we are dealing with the Shtetl as my father remembered it. We have an incredible map of the Shtetl, showing more than 100 locations in Poland, and probably more than 1,000 locations in Poland, and many beyond that. And I think that Natalia will have something to say about what is a Shtetl, because that becomes the center of gravity for the pre-war period, in contrast with the post-Jewish town of the post-war period. A very special feature of the exhibition is the wood from which the exhibition is fabricated, and Natalia will be talking about that and discussing the way in which the wood was salvaged from a building that was about to collapse in Opatów, a pre-war school. And Justyna will talk about the objects that were found. We didn't think we'd find anything, and we found, that is to say, Justyna and Natalia found all kinds of fascinating objects, post-Jewish objects, and they'll be talking about that. And as I indicated, the starting point are these interviews recorded over a 40-year period. And I know this painting is very important to Justyna, so I wanted to show it, The Boy with the Hoop, and she'll tell you why this painting was very inspiring for her. And I think that Natalia will say something about post-Jewish and where we found the word for the first time. This is a map from the mid-1940s, and it's a map of locations in Opatów, marking what was where and who each property belonged to. And on this map, one can find the word po-Żydowskie, post-Jewish, in many, many, many locations, and Natalia will be talking to us about what that means. Now, central to the exhibition, and is a marvelous concept, is this, what I would call vis-a-vis, front and back, or a kind of juxtaposition of the town as my father remembered it. So, for example, the synagogue, here we see the exterior, and this is what it looked like after the war. So that kind of contrast is very, very central. And of course, the interior of the synagogue, this is the only record that we have of what this synagogue looked like inside. The only record we have is the painting that he created. And so with that, I'll conclude, and I'll turn the floor over to Stuart. Stuart, you're muted.
Hi. Okay, so sorry about that. So I was saying, Barbara, we are going to go and speak with Justyna and Natalia, but if you could just briefly define post-Jewish before we jump into the conversation, it would be extraordinarily helpful.
Okay, let me do it from the perspective of how meaningless the term is in English. That's my specialty.
Okay.
And Natalia will have a lot more to say about what it means in Polish.
Okay.
So when we use the term, and well, frankly, we don't usually use the term in English. If you say the word post-Jewish in English, nobody knows what it means. And in the very few places where I found it in the 1990s, American Jewish historians, they were talking about post-diaspora, post-ethnic, post-modern, post-this, post-that, but of course also post-Jewish. And in the American context, it refers to identity. That's another conversation. But in the Polish context, it only ever refers to one thing, and that is property. And that is, it's a term that only appears during and after, really after the Holocaust. And it appears as a way of referring to property that became, in a sense, orphaned by dispossession through violence. So it is defined by the violence of the Holocaust and the severing of the connection between that property and its Jewish owners. So that in a nutshell, it would be the starting point. But I think Natalia will have more to say about it, because in the course of the exhibition, Justyna and Natalia really developed and expanded on that idea to go way, way beyond property and to bring us to the point where we could talk about a post-Jewish town. So that's how I would, that would be our starting point.
Fantastic. So actually, why don't we turn to Natalia and talk about how you view Mayer's work in a post-Jewish context. So Mayer Kirshenblatt's work has been displayed in exhibitions of his own in the United States, in Holland, and other places around the world. And what is different about the way you and Justyna organized this exhibition from the perspective of post-Jewish?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. And I think what is different, that was this beautiful coalition with Barbara and Justyna. So also our own research, which I think was like very different than in Amsterdam and also in New York. And also Mayer, like very specific multi-directional memory, which is actually bridging between his past, but also what is happening right now in Opatów. So this is like a very, very different glimpse. And the whole title of the exhibition and also our research was taken from post-war geodetic survey maps from Opato from the 1945, and on which maybe buildings were left behind by exterminated Jewish residents. And pożydowskie in Polish refers to the, I would say, very new category of places, but also objects, that Justyna will talk about the object. And the term emerged in a post-Holocaust studies in Poland and refer to the property that was left behind by those who were perished, and also evokes uncertainty. And sometimes this post-Jewish pożydowskie is very close related to the fear that the Jews might return and also reclaim their property back. And some of the possessions in Poland after 1945, they were confiscated, or they were, for example, looted during a crime. But also some of the objects, but also buildings, they found the guardians, like, for example, Mr. Brudkowski or Darek's object, who actually help us to navigate and to find the key to the pożydowskie property. And our study visit with Justyna, we were with Senna Collective in Opatów more than 6 times. Our artistic investigation, I think all this give rise to the concept of the post-Jewish property. And the last element that I will also remark, which was very important, thinking about the post-Jewish property, was our critical attempt of the Poland that you can find, especially in the previous government, that people would say like a Poland and the Shtetls before the war, that was a milk and honey country. And we know, as Mayer Kirshenblatt said, like it was hard life, everyone struggled. And I think this critical idea, what was happening right now after the war with the Shtetl, that was the main idea, how post-Jewish, pożydowskie, the whole definition was very important to us, and the changes.
Fantastic. Let's turn to Justyna. My understanding is that there was one particular painting by Mayer that inspired you to think about how to curate the exhibition. So if you could tell all of us about that, I think everyone would find it very interesting.
Yes, thank you very much, Stuart. That is an interesting question because it somehow enters us into the problem of how to divide all these topics that are complex and multi-layered and shape it into an exhibition. And the painting that inspired us in terms of how to divide this story in the exhibition room was a painting called The Boy with a Hoop. And it depicts Mayer, of course, as a child, as he always painted himself like this, as a boy. And he is playing his best game that he loved since he was 5 up to he was 14. He loved to run around the city of Opatów with a hoop. And this is how he actually was memorizing the places that stayed with him for so long. Because as Barbara mentioned, he left Opatów when he was about 17 in 1934, before the Holocaust. But for many years, he didn't come back until 1990s. So everything he memorized was also thanks to the investment of his play in Opatów. So when we saw this painting, we decided to juxtapose it with the memory map, the map that he actually drew for Barbara, to show her the places she couldn't see because she hasn't been there for so long until their first visits in 1990s. And she wanted to get to know about the topography of the city. And we thought that his great memory of all the specifics in town that stayed with him for so many years was also thanks to the game he was playing. But also, that's the first very literal dimension, so to say. But another dimension that we took out from this painting was that he was playing with a hoop, and a hoop, a circle, is also the circle that we repeated in the exhibition room itself, because as you enter the exhibition room, you can see that you are surrounded by about 70 paintings by Mayer, and the center of the exhibition is the wooden table. It's surrounded by wooden frames, wooden walls that tell you the story of post-Jewish town, but you are surrounded by the paintings. So somehow you are entering the metaphor of the hoop that he was running with when he was a child, and you are immersed in his memories in the so-called lost world. Because we should also mention that Mayer's works are valuable also because of its documentary value. They document the wars that has disappeared after the war. So if you are looking for example for the most accurate paintings to show you how the Opatów synagogue looked, you have to turn to Mayer's paintings, because there is no other document now that could easily show you how the building looked like, because in 1960s the building was finally dismantled after many years of devastation. So I think that this painting is very important in terms of this exhibition. It is kind of a center of the metaphor you get into while you enter the space.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's really fascinating. Why don't we, the topic of the wood has come up, the found wood, which Barbara showed pictures of, images of, that was used in the exhibition itself. And let's turn to Natalia about how did you identify the wood? Where was it from? And how did you come to decide how to use it in the exhibition? And if you could describe all of that, that would be so helpful.
Yes, so this timber from the collapse and demolished wood that was we were taking from so-called Black School. That was the kindergarten and school for Polish and Jewish kids before the Second World War. And the idea was actually to use this wooden heritage as a kind of reminder, and also showing to the audience, not in a POLIN, but also in people in Opatów, how situation with the wooden heritage is really bad, not only in Poland, but also in Ukraine, Belarus, in the Czech. So this is actually the general approach, showing what is happening with the material witness. And this, like when the wood we collect from the school, wood was cleaned and was also conservated and was used for the construction, not only frames, because we are showing in our exhibition frames dedicated to the subject, like for example, cemetery, synagogue, that is like a Shoah, professions in a pre-war Opatów, but also we design the tables and the chairs from this wood. And this is like I really like this quote from Susan Schupli. She is a member of Forensic Architecture Collective. And she said like that precisely material objects are very important and very often overlooked witness to the past. So from the beginning, we thought with Justyna, but also with Sebastian Kucharuk, Piotr Jakowenko, that we really need material witness. And second, actually, idea of the material witness was the mikveh in Opatów, which is not wooden architecture at all. But the mikveh on Opatów was established in the 18th century. But also we decided to work with the mikveh, which actually the whole building stay untouched. But inside, that was converted into the candy factory. Actually, after the war, the food industry cooperative, they converted to the factory. And also we decided to make a geodetic survey scan to show to our audience how the situation changed after the Second World War, and also using like a new generation laser technology scanner to reflect about the changes. And that's why material witness wood was our shames. And very often with Barbara, we are talking about Mayer as our shames, as our helper to achieve also current situation in Opatów, and looking through his memory and also looking through his, just like shapes, architecture. So that's why this is always this dialogue, others and revers, between the past and present.
So, and Natalia, if the wood had not been discovered by you and the team, and you hadn't used it in the exhibition, and as you noted, it's wood from a school that both Jewish and Polish children attended before World War II, what might have become of that wood?
From the beginning, we were quite sure that will be wood. That was our goal. And I wrote my PhD about post-Jewish architecture of memory and non-memory in the former shtetls already 5 or 6 years ago. And I was really obsessed with the wood and how we know very little about the previous functions of the buildings, not only synagogues, mikveh, but also private houses, private dwellings, and how the post-Jewish property changed. So the wood with the thousand conversation with, for example, Brama Zuckermana, Brama Grodzka, the people who are really taking care of the Jewish heritage. That was the main idea, to bring the wood to POLIN, which was not a really easy task.
But Natalia, I think that Stuart's asking, had POLIN Museum not bought this building that was falling apart and was going to be demolished?
Yes.
If the museum hadn't bought it and you and Justyna hadn't decided to use it, what would have been the fate of that wood?
It's a very good question, but I don't know, to be honest.
I can interrupt. I remember the woman we were talking to, the owner of the place where the building was situated, and she said that she also had another wooden building which didn't have such an interesting story for us, and she has already sold it in early 2000s, sold the wood to a Danish factory that I think was doing something with furniture. So probably it would also be sold to become furniture. But there's also the story that Natalia knows from Darek Sowczyk about the wood from former wooden houses that collapsed in Opatów. And it was sold to a factory of a meat factory to smoke sausages.
Yeah, firewood.
Yes. So that was also a possibility for this wood to become.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing.
But we don't know the story about this wood. So probably they will be sold, that will be demolished. So and the half of the building was in a very bad shape. So we spent really hours thinking what kind of part of the building, like maybe part of the roof, maybe the wall from the north side of the village will be good to actually show in our exhibition. So there was a very long discussion, and actually the school was demolished. And together with Justyna and Sebastian, we thought we cannot actually demolish any house. So there was a first ethical attempt. If we would like to buy part of the building must be destroyed, or just collecting the wood. So Mr. Brutkowski, who is a really key figure in our exhibition, and Justyna will talk about it more, about his amazing collection, he was also helping us to find some pieces of the wood for this exhibition. And what is also very important to underline, our first attempt was to design this exhibition as a traveling exhibition, something that will also possess the aura of our critical thinking about the shtetls. So if the exhibition will travel, we will also show the frames. And again, the material witness will be, just like the aura of this particular shtetl.
That's so helpful. So really, had you not done this and salvaged the wood, it's possible it could have been lost to history. But instead, it is now going to, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people will be able to see it, and it will bear witness during the exhibition as well. So why don't you, Justyna, let the other major element that you just referred to and Barbara spoke about were the found objects, post-Jewish display of found objects from Opatov. If you could tell us how you found them and what they are and what role they play in the exhibition, please.
Yes, of course. That's an interesting question, especially because it was very challenging to get any objects at first. When we started working on this exhibition, it was more than 2 years ago. We had no objects, just a promise of getting the collection of Mayer's paintings into POLIN, and this was, we were sure that we're gonna get that, but except of that, just the concept to get the wood and no possibility of getting any original objects. So Natalia and I started our visits to Opatów, our work on the spot with local people, and at first they were like, no, we have no original objects, no one remembers, no one lives here anymore, people changed, new inhabitants came after the war, so you will not get anything from us because we don't have anything. But gradually, as we were talking to them, we were presenting the exhibition, we had many meetings with PowerPoint presentations about our idea of how to treat Mayer and his oeuvre in this new post-Jewish context. People started opening up, and person by person they approached us, and finally also Darek Sobczyk enabled us to get in touch with Mr. Brutkowski, mentioned by Natalia, who is a local collector. He's very much interested in collecting Judaica and objects connected to Jewish life, not only in Opatów, but in pre-war Poland, basically. And we were, I think, the only ones who entered his private house, which has occurred to be a private museum, because he keeps it to himself. He had some difficult situations and experience connected with his interest in Jewish topics, so he wasn't very open at first, but finally I think that we got a good connection, and thanks to that he donated 90% of objects that we have at our exhibition come from his collection, and his collection is vast and beautiful and valuable and amazing, and he's a keeper of Jewish past and the memory of Opatów Jews out there. And there is a huge showcase in the exhibition, more or less in the central place, that we called Polish. Polish is a Jewish word we got from Mayer, from Barbara and her father's book, They Called Me Mayer July. And this word actually describes this architectural part of the synagogue, where the paths to the main hall and to the women's section cross. But in Opatów, out there, they had a huge storage for the old Torah scrolls. And these Torah scrolls were desecrated, were used, and they couldn't use it for a celebration anymore. So they stored it, and when the proper amount was collected, there was the funeral at the Jewish cemetery. So although it's not the correct name, because the actual name for this place is Geniza, we decided to use Polish as the name of this showcase. And what's inside the showcase? First of all, many objects from Jerzy Brudkowski collection, orphaned objects, post-Jewish objects with difficult stories or with no stories at all. We just have scraps of their stories because there are no people who own them, no people who use them. So this, to us, this object presented as those desecrated Torah scrolls, orphaned, lost, sometimes modified, so that they could be used in another context. For example, there is a Hanukkah lamp that also has a small plaque with a Shabbat blessing, and we are wondering how it happened because now it's falsified, it's fishy, but gradually we got to know also from another collector that it was very popular in 1980s, when the rights of return of the Jewish families and the descendants of those who survived and the survivors, they started traveling back to Poland to seek for their roots, to visit their old home places and hometowns. And then this kind of objects, the post-Jewish objects, Judaica, have become very popular and valuable. And people who had no idea about how Judaica looked like and about the history of the Jews, their culture, their tradition, they just wanted to make money on it. So they decided to reshape the objects. And Natalia and I had a big discussion whether to include this fishy object into our exhibition or not. But we decided that this is one of the objects that actually capture what post-Jewish objects actually are in nowadays Poland, probably Ukraine, Belarus as well, in the former Shtetl Yiddish land. And this is one of many objects we have in store at the exhibition. And there is also a fragment of desecrated Torah scroll, which is only a page cut off from a huge scroll found in the ruins, in the rubble of former Opatów synagogue in 1945 or something, around 1945. And Natalia asked her colleague, rabbi, to check what it's about, and it's about difficult neighborhood, about about not being allowed to steal land from your neighbor. So we thought it's very symbolic, and it really fits into our Polish showcase.
Wow. Well, that's very, very powerful. And I'm just curious, in addition to the Hanukkah lamp and the fragment of the Torah scroll, are there one or two other objects that you'd like to mention that are in the exhibition?
But maybe very briefly, the object that for me personally is like very important, there are 4 Hanukkah lamps and menorah lamps made from wood. And also they were found by Mr. Brudkowski, and you can see they are not beautiful. They kind of, again, possess this aura of something that you cannot really find a key when they were made. So we are thinking with Justyna, so probably when the silvers, Hanukkah or menorah lamp were taken by Germans, all the Polish neighbors, people start to design, they made the wooden Hanukkah lamps. So inside even you can see like some parts of the ash, and we think like this is also our reflection, what post-Jewish object means. Or for example, the key to the synagogue or to the cemetery with the Magen David, which actually we placed inside on the cover of our, again, reverse of our beautiful catalog, post-Jewish. And, all these elements, I think they are really very important. And together with Matan Shefi, specialist from the POLIN Museum, we have like a different investigation, thinking like, for example, what was written, dating, like the checking also from which year is exactly this Hanukkah lamp, or maybe other elements, or the Kiddush cup. So this is like a really also beautiful that we are running independent research related to the object.
So, Natalia and Justyna, I think it would be just so interesting to know how did the people in the town, including the man who was the collector, how did they react to you when you appeared in Opatov and you started your research? Were they welcoming from the minute you arrived? Were they suspicious? What was your experience?
Well, actually, at first we were quite lucky because thanks to Barbara, we met Dariusz Sobczyk, who lives in Opatów, and he was a longtime friend of Mayer, a younger friend. Barbara probably can share this beautiful story, but he is very dedicated to the memory of the Jews in Opatów and also the memory of Mayer. And we were also lucky because in early 2000s, Mayer used to travel to Opatów, and he was very well accepted by the local inhabitants. He even had his own exhibition in 2008 in the Starostwo Opatowskie, in the main local administration building, where he showed copies of his original paintings, and he also toured local people, telling them the anecdotes and the stories he depicted, and people were massively interested and really into this topic. So when we got there, there were still many friends of Mayer. So as Natalia said, Mayer was our shames from the very first moment. And there was a huge group of people who also visited us at the opening of the exhibition and who are really invested in sharing the story of Mayer and making Opatów famous from this amazing person.
And
Yes, but also like a cooperation with the, for example, director of the candy factory, Mr. Marchewka. And I think like because Mayer was our key, that was a bit easier. And I remember this moment while we were researching, I think like a Judaica, somebody called us, the lady in a nearby village, that she found a piece of the matzevot in her yard. And she called Darek Sobczyk, and she also contacted us what she can do with the piece of the matzeva. And of course, we decided to bring matzeva to the lapidarium, to the Jewish cemetery. Now currently is also commemoration, but also is a part of the public park, unfortunately. And that was always the story within the story. That's why this beautiful, but also very intense 2 years researching, not from one side, not only Mayer Kirshenblatt paintings, making archival research at the Polish Academy of Science, Jewish Historical Institute, but being in Opatów. I think these three elements all provide us the outcome of this exhibition.
And the collector himself, how did he react when you started approaching him and discussing including his objects in the exhibition?
Well, it wasn't easy. When we went there first time, he didn't want to meet. Then the second time we went by Darek Sobczyk's car, and Natalia and Kasia, who was the organizational managing curator of the exhibition, were sitting in the car, and me and Darek went to him to talk to him, and he didn't even want to turn around to talk to us. But gradually, slowly talking and encouraging him, he wanted to share, because I think Natalia agrees that he has a huge, huge drive for this topic, and he is really dedicated to his work and to preserving the memory of the Jews in Opatów. He even invested his own money in buying old matzevot that were taken from the Jewish cemetery during the occupation and during the post-war period, and were found in people's courtyards. So he was visiting these people and paying them money to get those matzevot back. And thanks to his money and his work, it was possible to build this monument, this lapidarium at the Jewish cemetery that was opened during the 80th anniversary of liquidation of Opatów ghetto in October 2022. I mean, the celebration was held in 2022. So his job is quite amazing.
Mm. So before we turn to Barbara for a last question, I have one really simple question. This gentleman who has spent so much time collecting found Jewish objects in Opatov and from other places, does he have any Jewish heritage himself?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Interesting. So with all of that, let's just turn to Barbara. I mean, Barbara, you worked with your dad from 1967 on this ongoing project until the end of his life, even with an exhibition back in Opatov. You curated several exhibitions of his artwork, on its own. So what was your reaction when you got a taste of what Justyna and Natalia were going to do at POLIN and put it in the post-Jewish context?
Well, I thought it was an absolutely brilliant concept, and that it's not something I ever would have, I don't think I could have conceived of it or executed it. I really feel that it's, it sort of adds depth and resonance to the entire project. Well, let me put it this way. I made my first trip to Poland in 1981, and I wanted to take my father with me, and he hadn't been back since he left in 34, and he wouldn't go. And then 7 years later, he said he wants to go. So I arranged and I brought him, and it was a very unsuccessful visit. It was 15 minutes in the town. It was on a Saturday. It was very hot in the summer, and he was so anxious, and he just wanted to leave. Then we came back again in 1995, and by that time he'd been painting for more than 5 years, and I had made for him an album with snapshots of his paintings. Mm-hmm. This time he ran around the town and he started buttonholing everybody he could find. He'd say things like, does anybody here remember anything from before the war? This is where the synagogue was. This is where the mikveh was. This is where and he would be showing them these little snapshots. The only person was Darius Sobchak. He was the only one. And that, I would say that it was the reception of the town to him, and he came with incredible openness. That was the connection between past and present. That the past was what he remembered, and the present was that the town embraced him. But there was no post-Jewish. There was nothing, not a hint of this, except that my father would say, he'd look around and he'd say, Jews lived here for 500 years, and there's not a single sign that they were once here. That would be the only post-Jewish moment from him. That was it. So, if I could just take a moment, because for me, what is very extraordinary is, however beautiful the exhibitions were that I curated, in one case with Aviva Weintraub, another case with Alla Efimova, however beautiful those exhibitions were of his paintings, and however wonderfully they were received in the United States, in Canada, in Amsterdam, nowhere compares with the overwhelming passion, enthusiasm, and appreciation that this exhibition and his paintings have been received as in Poland. Mm-hmm. And I think a very interesting question for us to consider, and perhaps those who are watching might be interested, is why? Why in Poland has the reception been so extraordinary? Over 74,000 visitors so far since the exhibition opened on May 17th. It's just unparalleled. And I think that that has very much to do with this post-Jewish framework, which is the great contribution of Justyna and Natalia.
Well, I just have to thank you, Barbara, Natalia, and Justyna. Of course, I saw the show twice when I was in Warsaw this year, and why it was such an amazing experience is so clear now after hearing all of you talk about it in such detail and with such passion. So thank you. And why don't we turn back to Halise Lieberman from the Taube Center and take it from there. Thank you so much.
Stuart, thank you. And thank you, Natalia, Justyna, and Barbara. Actually, Barbara, I think the question that you just raised is something I'd like to start off with. I think it's resonating with our viewers. And also another question that I'd like to share with you is a little bit about that transition in minds of descendants from the shtetl to a post-Jewish town to which they belong. And how do they visit, and how may this inspire others to go back to their roots and what they may find, not just that first impression, but as they look at the wood and they follow the paths. So let's start with why has this exhibition had such a profound impact here in Poland, Barbara?
Okay, well, thank you. If I could just, actually, I'll leave the second question to Natalia and Justyna about, what is hidden in plain sight, about being able to discover traces, because that's exactly what they did in their exceptional research. But I think there were some comments from Natalia in the conversation about post-Jewish that are a key, and that is that the whole notion of post-Jewish is, it sounds like it's over. If you were to say post-war, it means the war is over. But in post-Jewish, it's not over. And I think that the ambiguity that these are properties and objects in limbo, that they are unclaimed, but they hold the potential of being claimed. And that the term itself, I would say the term itself is linked with anxiety. Whether it's the anxiety even 80 years later that somebody may come back and reclaim the property. But there's an element of anxiety about the liminal uncertainty about these objects and these properties. That is, that's the first point. The second point is that, think about it this way. In October, I think October 22nd in 1942, when the ghetto in Opatów was liquidated, you have to keep in mind that there were, by that time, about 7,000 Jews in the ghetto, because they had brought Jews from the surrounding areas into the ghetto as well. That within basically 2 days, 60% of the town had left. They were deported to Treblinka. So they left. Their apartments were full of all their possessions. Their shops were full of all their inventory. That literally in 2 days, you wake up the next morning and 60% of the population is gone. And so what happens to that property? What happens to those buildings? What happens to those apartments and those shops? And who are the beneficiaries of that tragedy? And how does one live with that? And I think that there's a way in which there are those who choose not to remember, those who choose not to know, and those who do know and have to live with that knowledge, even if they're not personally responsible for what happened. And I think that that's not something an American Jewish viewer at an exhibition of these paintings is encountering. They're not encountering that. So there's something about this exhibition, about the way in which Mayer, in a way, he was a kid. He didn't have the responsibilities of an adult. He didn't go through the Holocaust. He didn't have direct experience of the trauma. So his paintings are so vibrant, so joyful, and he had a great childhood. I mean, to be able to run around this town and nobody was worried about him, being kidnapped or God knows what. There's a kind of, there's something about the paintings that, and juxtaposition with this post-Jewish town, which is devoid. I mean, unless you know how to look, my father was right. You look around and there's no sign that Jews ever lived here. And they were once, for 500 years, they lived here. And in the period of the 20s and 30s, they were up to 6,000, 60% of the town.
Right.
So I think that there's something essentially for Jews living in North America. Their concern is with people, with their relatives, with their families, with their neighbors, with the Jewish community, and with their lives before the war in the town. But for those who are there today, there are no Jews, but there's their property.
Right.
So there's a kind of asymmetry between the relationship of those living in the town today to the property that they're living in and working in and possessing, and the Jews, the descendants of them, for whom it's the people who are no longer there that are what matter to them. So there's something going. I mean, I don't have an answer, but that's how I begin to think about it.
But if I can add, Barbara, I think it's also a very difficult subject in Poland and also in Ukraine, speaking with my Ukrainian colleagues. It's a really unpacked subject, thinking about this kind of parallax view, what was before the war and how the property are used, convert right now. So I think like also our role and also Senna Collective was really to extract the new language and also thinking about these forensic tools, like, for example, scanning mikveh or working with the wood to also define language to actually talk to the audience, for example, from United States, and talked about this very difficult subject, and also extract and navigate through the different, very difficult subject, like, for example, Jewish street. In one of the frame in our exhibition with Justyna, we decided to put the names and the surnames of the people who lives only in one street. The name was a Jewish street, Berka Juselewicza Street, which was inhabited by 1,967 people. And in the shape of the mezuzot, we put all names and the surnames. And the other side of the frame, we have an empty mezuzah because nobody survived from the inhabitants from the street. And also we are showing the pictures how the architecture in the 20s and the 30s, this wooden architecture, was really in a bad shape. So from the other side, the research is very difficult, but then still this kind of even small traces of the material witness might unpacked or repacked this discourse of the post-Jewish property and also who inhabited those places, which actually, especially like now young kids and the schoolmates, they sometimes have no idea that they live in a previous Jewish workshops, houses, or what was the previous role of the mikveh. So I think the new language was also very important for us, and for me in the future, how this language we can adapt to the different other exhibitions.
Justyna, I was just curious, Justyna, your thoughts on this question.
Well, I think that Natalia has raised a very important issue of using architecture as a tool to somehow milden difficult issues like post-Jewishness, pożydowskie, in Polish. We had a discussion in June at POLIN Museum among the specialists and experts about the term post-Jewish, and historians and lawyers were very reserved as to use this term without question marks because they said, oh, it's from the common language, it's not from the official language, and I quarreled that is not true. It appears in official documents, like our surveyors' maps, for example, but not only, also in regular documents sent from one administration venue to another one, because I think that they were quite afraid of using this term as scholars as well, because it's, as Barbara said, it is an anxious word, a word that is packed with so many layers and meanings. But as Natalia said, architecture or design or exhibition design, scenography is a tool that helps us to get the viewers inside new surroundings, inside a new theater of history. And this is a way we can show them in somehow more mild way, show them the issues that they really have to confront with in a very somehow stressful, anxious circumstances. But this kind of exhibition we have designed, Natalia and Senna Collective have designed, actually creates a safe space to talk about a difficult past. So I think that this is a mission of exhibitions like this one.
Want to stop any of this conversation, and I'm particularly grateful that we're going to end with this open question, many open questions in terms of, as you say, what as post-Jewish, what does it mean to me as someone, or Stuart, who has come to visit his family towns, and others that the Taube Center is happy to have and continues to host as they come looking for the town, what from memory from their parents about, not about anything perhaps where the synagogue was, but the hill behind our house and the lovely trees that were there. So I hope that we will have this opportunity on future TJHT talks to explore that memory, that difficult memory and anticipated memory. And I really, we're indebted to all of you. Thank you, first of all, for creating. Thank you, Barbara, for asking your father questions. We thank your father for painting his answers. And I want to thank all of you, Natalia and Justyna, for creating an extraordinary exhibition, which prompts many thoughts, many questions, and many responses. And Stuart, thank you for fielding questions. I know you have many more, and we look forward to them. Want to, first of all, before we say goodnight, I'm going to say goodnight. Some of you will say good morning, good afternoon. We want to congratulate the POLIN Museum on its 10th year. It should bis 120 to 120. And again, thank you all for joining us. We're delighted that you support us. We hope to see you soon. If you'd like to support this program and ongoing programs, we'd be happy to share the donation information with you. And to Barbara and to Justyna and to Natalia and to Stuart, many, many thanks for bringing the exhibition to our viewers. Hopefully they will come see it, if not perhaps through the virtual tour. And we look forward to hosting you again in the future. And we look forward to seeing all of you at the next TJH talk in November. Dobranoc, good night, Laila Tov. Thank you all.
Laila Tov, dobranoc.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.